Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Very echoey in here. The next section is on mobile payment security. And if I can get this thing to work, there we go. One of the things this presentation is not is a technical presentation. It's not a sales pitch of any products or anything like that. Really what I'm trying to achieve is to pose questions. I'm not even proposing to have all the answers, but at least if we can stimulate some debate, hopefully between us all, we can have some consensus and some answers to things. A little bit about PSC and the company I work for. We're based here in San Jose. We have offices in Canada, in the UK, and Australia. And we are a consulting company that specializes in the business of payments. We basically, all our clients either accept payments, process payments, or are in the technology of payments. We don't sell or resell any third-party products. We take independence extremely seriously, so we don't get any commissions from anybody or anything else like that. So we're a pure-play consulting company in payments and payment security. One of the things, when I've been to the various mobile payments conferences, is a few definitions of what mobile payments is. And I think it really does depend on who you talk to as what they mean about mobile payments. Obviously, I think the current favorite is digital wallets, and probably some of the people here are wallet vendors and things like that. But mobile web payments, using a mobile device like an iPhone or an iPad that I'm using to do this presentation, to do payments, could be considered mobile payments presentment. Online wallets, obviously, people like PayPal, those sort of things. But then we get into what is more traditional payments, but non-traditional when you think mobile payments. NFC contactless cards. Well, they're pretty mobile. You carry them around in your pocket or your purse or your wallet, and you can pay with stuff. Cash, that's probably the original mobile payment instrument. And I think one of the things that people forget about cash, where it wins over everything else in mobile payments, is it's completely anonymous. When you make a payment, you don't give over any information. So from a presentment point of view, that could be a really, really good thing. From an acceptance point of view, it might be a real pain because you want to get all this information from the individuals to be able to present them with offers. Checks, obviously, although checks are dying, they are a mobile instrument for payment. Credit and debit cards. More recently, fast pass cards, the toll ideas. And there's been a lot of conversation I've heard in other conferences about using some form of extended NFC to a digital wallet so that as you drive past a toll booth, it can automatically take your tolls. Here in California, the Golden Gate Bridge is about to move away from having toll booth personnel. And they're going to go with vehicle license plate registration. So you either have a fast track or your license plate is photographed, they then go to the DMV records and send you a bill. And somehow somebody tells me that it's probably going to cost more than having a fast track device. But these are all mobile and they're all mechanisms for making a payment. I think where a lot of people think of mobile payments is also in the area of mobile acceptance. In other words, what a merchant's doing to accept mobile payments, not only with a physical device maybe in a store, but also in a mobile environment. So mobile point of sale. I think if you go to just about any any restaurant in the UK, for example, the point of sale system, because Visa and MasterCard's rules in the UK is that the card cannot leave the cardholder's site at any time. They bring the POS to the cardholder. And you stick in your EMV card or swipe it if it's a mag stripe, and the transaction is done there. Now that's true mobile payment acceptance. It's a mobile device that's accepting payment. Smartphones, PDAs, iPad tablets are obvious ones. Square has developed a huge amount of press and really exposure to the idea of using mobile devices which are more consumer-based rather than financial-based. and allowing them to be able to accept payments. We have a client who is in Canada, and they are a transit organization. And what they have done is on their buses and trains, they put NFC devices on the door. So you can actually, the driver can open the door, but if you walk up with your NFC card, it will open the door to the bus or the train. It will take the payment, and you sit down. The question I've always asked is, well, what happens if you've got 5 NFC cards in your pocket? Does it take you from all 5 of them? So I think, now, is that a mobile acceptance? It's on a bus, it's on a train, it's definitely mobile. The actual device that is doing the processing of the payments is actually a modified mobile phone. So, yeah, it fits the definition of a mobile device, but it's fastened to a bus, and a bus isn't exactly the most easily mobile thing. Laptop, is a laptop a mobile device for accepting payments? Desktop, I think, is an argument that it's not. When you look at security, which is really what we're talking about, you know, some of the good, the bad, and the ugly of the security in this space, in the presentment area, the security of your cash, your credit cards, your mobile phone, your digital wallets, or whatever, is typically the responsibility of the card holder or the payment instrument holder, if it's not a credit card or a debit card. And that is often driven by the regulations that are set out by the card issuers. If we're talking about a credit and a debit card, they have very specific rules about how you should look after your card holder, and we've all read all those little brochures we get in our billing bills written in like 8 font. But most of those say that you shouldn't let the card out of your sight, you should maintain control. Obviously, you shouldn't let people have your PINs and all those sort of things. And so the security is under your control. There are really no industry standards, though, for digital wallets. If you take that credit card number or that debit card number and put it into a digital wallet, where's the security? It's still, in theory, under the control of the cardholder because it's in their mobile phone. The problem is that the device itself, the security of the device itself, the security of the application, all those sort of things are now out of the control of the cardholder if we're talking about credit and debit. But they are still being held accountable to the security of that device. And also, not so much in the USA, but certainly in Canada, in Australia, in Europe, in the UK, there are big issues about personal data, personal information. And digital wallets are another brave new frontier where it's an opportunity to do real marketing that's really targeted to the card holders and the wallet holders. The question is when you're soliciting this data, what are you going to do with it? Because the data itself has value. It's not. A lot of people think about, when they think about mobile payment security, they think about, okay, how do we protect the card number or the payment instrument device so that people can't steal more money or replicate it. But also, the personal information that you collect as part of that transaction, which you can then use to do targeted marketing, has a lot of value. And it has to be protected as well. And we're seeing a lot of clients, although we obviously specialize in the area of payment security in all its forms, we're seeing a lot of our clients going, well, can we apply the same techniques or the same methodologies to PII as payment card information, PCI? And of course, there are a lot more federal regulations, well, not federal, but state regulations about protection of personal data than there is about protection of card data. I mean, California, I think, has 3 or 4 laws alone about protection of personal data. Also, when we're looking at mobile payment presentment, what about how? You know, I think I've only just turned up at this conference, so forgive me if you've already got there. But typically, these conferences spend a lot of time talking about NFC as the main vehicle for mobile wallet enablement. But what about, you know, using IP over 3G, Bluetooth? Not ideal solutions. I don't think any of them necessarily are ideal solutions. Certainly, using a Wi-Fi connection or a Bluetooth connection may not be a good idea. I've seen some solutions using texting, and having received text 3 or 4 hours after people have sent it, I think that could be really frustrating if I was waiting for a dynamic PIN to arrive before I could actually buy this thing. There are there are lots of standards, but they're all different. And the challenge is the ubiquity across the industry. I think if you look back in time about where the credit and debit cards were coming into the space to replace checks and cash back in the 70s, there was some technology enablement, people like people making ATMs, card swipes, point-of-sale systems, things like that. But for those of you that are as old as I am, you may remember that you go into a store and there'd be 3 or 4 point-of-sale devices. There'd be a Visa one, there'd be a MasterCard one, and there was always a separate Amex one, even if Visa and MasterCard was together, and Discover or whatever. And it's taken 10, 15 years before that gradually all came together. And what happened ultimately was that there was a common standard created, all about the magstripe data, the way card data was processed, the end-to-end solution, which then enabled it. And that once you reached ubiquity, then the cardholders saw value. And then much as we as industry vendors or consultants or whatever try and push a particular solution as the next best thing, until the end cardholders or users see real value to it, it's not going to happen. We can create the best thing possible as an industry, but if it doesn't add any value if it doesn't improve something, it's not going to happen. We can't rely on the 18 to 30-year-olds to drive everything forwards. The biggest issue, I think, is the chicken and egg, especially in getting mobile adoption on a large scale without a common standard. Now, I'm not suggesting the government should federalize it, make it a standard, that's something like that. But the challenge is every day we pick up a document and it says so-and-so is coming out with a new digital wallet. Today, the Electronic Transaction Association, one of their RSS feeds, they're saying that major retailers are now looking at creating their own wallets because they believe that they've got a stronger brand than the telcos or the search engine companies or whoever. Banks are now looking at going, I think. Now, we've heard all this before with SET, for those of us that remember that, and verified by Visa about the bank branding. And being front of wallet is a real big issue for anybody in the payment space. In other words, use my card, be it a Visa card or a Wells Fargo card or a B of A card, whatever, rather than somebody else's. Looking at the acceptance side of the business, in other words, how does a merchant actually accept payment? There are some standards. There are primarily 3 groups of standards. The Payment Card Industry Security Standards Council has a suite of standards. There is what's called the PCI DSS, the PCI Data Security Standard, which is a standard that applies to businesses that accept or process payments. And it's basically 12, they're stronger than best of practices, but they're 12 overarching rules for how to protect what's called a PAN, a personal account number, the 16 digits or the 15-digit number on the front of your card. They also have a standard called the Payment Application Data Security Standard, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about, which applies specifically to payment apps. So if you have a payment app, if you're a service provider or a software vendor and you're selling a payment solution to merchants or something like that, and this application stores, processes, or transmits card data, be it credit or debit card data, for the purpose of an authorization or a settlement, then you're required to have this application PADSS validated. And I'm going to come on to this. What that simple statement I've just made, I'm now going to tear to bits, and I've got 5 minutes to do it in, or 10 minutes to do it in, so I'm going to go through it quickly. The card companies themselves, the acquirers, they all have rules and regulations about how to manage data. And as I mentioned earlier, PII, personal information, there are 40+ states now that have requirements for what you do in a breach, from a sense of, somebody's may have accessed either personal information or payment information. And God forbid it's both of them. So coming back to looking at the PADSS. PADSS has 3 categories of mobile acceptance devices. And category 1 is your classic, the POS that I was talking about that you see in an English restaurant, or in the hotel here that's on the front counter. It's what's called a PTS-approved device. Its function in life is to accept a credit card number by either a swipe or a PIN pad. They're okay. Category 2 is basically a mobile device, but is specifically just for payments. So in other words, if you made a box that had a PIN pad on it that was approved and a card swipe, and you ran an app on it that accepted payments, and let's say it was on an iPad, and that's all it did. You disabled everything else on the iPad. That's category 2, and that's okay as well. You can get PADSS certified for that. This is the challenge, though, category 3, which is not okay. Now remember, you have to get everything PADSS validated. Payment application operating on any consumer electronic handheld device, i.e. a smartphone, a tablet, a PDA. So in other words, Square with a card reader on the top of a mobile phone fits into this category. The problem is it can't get PADSS validated. And unfortunately, you're required to be PADSS validated to do the transactions. So let's look at Visa. What are they? I'm going to go at Visa and MasterCard to quickly give you a feel about. We've got 3 completely different stories from the Council, which is an industry organization, and the 2 major card brands. Visa considers a customer mobile device, any electronic handheld device, smart, et cetera, so typically a smartphone, a tablet, a PDA. And they have a set of best practices for accepting payments on a consumer mobile device. And the actual physical application consists of a mobile payment app, which is something you need to get PADSS approved, a consumer mobile device, which you can't get that application approved on because it's a consumer device, and where electronic data is electronically read from a payment card. This is specifically for Visa. They're talking about also having the ability to read a traditional piece of plastic, be it either EMV, be it NFC, or magstripe. So there's confusion there. But they at least have a set of standards about what you should do and what you shouldn't do to keep card data. So here's MasterCard. This is their PADSS mandate that comes out the 1st of July, which basically says, if you have a payment app and you want to connect to our network, it has to be PADSS approved, black and white. But of course, as we know, it can't be, in the mobile space, can't be PADSS approved. So that now we've got 3 completely different solutions going in different directions. The challenge is, obviously, that we've got a market that's moving, and all the standards and the security and everything is being dragged, as usual, is being dragged on almost as an afterthought. Let's get it working, let's get some customers, and then we can make it look pretty, and then we can make it secure. Yeah, that's typically the way the world works. The challenge is with mobile payments, it's a lot more complicated than just a web page. And once you get complexity, earlier on I was talking about interoperability, common standards, this is all going to make it more complicated. If it makes it more complicated, it's going to make it harder to secure. So it's a bit of a self-defeating protocol. Multiple protocols, multiple devices. Somehow, I don't think everybody's going to buy an iPhone or one type of Android device. It's just not the real world. And so you're going to have to support many, many physical formats as well. Penetration testing is a good way of testing these things, because guess what the bad guys do first? The bad guys will pen test all these apps to see if they can get into them. There aren't many organizations that do pen testing in this space because they don't understand it. They understand a traditional network, they understand a web server, they understand those sort of environments, but they don't understand the unique needs of the payment space. Because it's Apple Week, and for those of us that have been in the Bay Area yesterday, they got quite a bit of press. This came out actually on Tuesday, the day before. One of Apple's iWallet patents, which is a scary thought that they're going to come out with a wallet as well. They have a whole suite of patents, and they all fall into this bucket of iWallet. What this one is in particular is effectively it's parental controls on wallet payments, where it may be, it's tiered authorization is the way to look at it. It might not be little Johnny, buying his drugs with his mobile payment device and needs his mum and dad to pay for it, to authorize it. But it could be one of my employees doing a financial transaction and they need me to authorize it. So Apple is getting into this space. They've got a whole suite of patents already on the go. This was granted 2 days ago. So, in summary, the challenge we've got is we've got a poor definition of a marketplace. Mobile payments means something different to everybody, depending on which particular axe you've got to grind. And as a result, it's hard to define security solutions. It tends to, you can't have a one-size-fits-all, and you can't have a one-size-fits every single one. You're going to have different solutions until you get some standards. The standards that are out there today don't actually protect the data. They're there to enable this environment. They're not there necessarily to protect the data. Card brand mandates, we've been through that. As you can see, they're all over the map. Depends on who you talk to as to what version you want to get. So the good news is you can always quote something that works to your benefit because there's always one of them that will do that. Risk-based and penetration testing are poor in this area. This is what I talked about earlier. It's a lot more complicated than traditional payment acceptance. The risks are very, very different because you've got many, many payment devices out in sort of the public's hands, so to speak. And there are not enough experts. There's an awful lot of vendors in this space. There's not a lot of what I would call experts in this space. And that's not to put anybody down, especially in this room, that considers them they tend to be experts in what they do well, not experts in the whole payments industry for mobile payments. So, did I manage to finish in time? I think so. Any questions? Didn't pose any questions then. Okay, yes. Firstly, there are a lot of what I would call solutions looking for problems. But I think that you saw that in the 90s as well with e-commerce and things like that. And that'll sort itself out. I think the challenge with PCI in particular is that most of the technology vendors in the mobile payment space come out of either a marketing background because they're trying to leverage marketing data, targeted marketing data. They come out of they're technologists that may fall into the solution looking for a problem bit, or they may be meeting a real need, but they're not coming at it from a point of knowing payment security. They're knowing how to do it. A couple of years ago, I called every software vendor in the App Store and talked to them about what did they know about payment security. Because if they were selling all these payment apps that sort of somebody could use at a craft fair to accept credit card numbers and things like that on their mobile phone, they were potentially liable. And apart from opening their eyes, I think is the polite way of putting it, or putting the fear of God into them, some of them, from some of the risks, that there was a total ignorance of the risk because nobody wanted to look at it. I mean, the reality is that nobody wants to say, okay, this is great, but let's look at all the risks first. You look at how I can get traction, how I can move markets, and then you'll clean it up afterwards. So there are very, very few clients that are looking really seriously at PCI specifically. And PCI is the only real standard in the payment space. Yeah, and I think that also applies to the card brands, the council. If somebody has a data breach and loses 50 credit cards, it's not the end of the world. But a website losing 500,000 credit cards is a big deal. Channel loses 500,000 credit cards. everybody it'll have their attention. And that, I think, is, and it's a little bit of that too little, too late in, rather than trying to bolt it on afterwards and make it work. Because if you bolt it on, it tends to end up crippling the user experience, or it cripples the actual technology itself.